Hi, this is Jim Jordan with a Citizens Legal Education, and today I'm making a short video on the Michigan Supreme Court's ruling that their Governor Whitmer's executive orders after the initial emergency declared in the beginning of March were unconstitutional. She had 28 days. After that time, she was to get the authorization from the state legislature to continue or expand those orders, and she did not get that. This is very similar to what happened in Oregon, interestingly. In our case, our Supreme Court ruled in favor of the governor. In the Michigan case, they ruled in favor of those challenging the governor's orders, saying that was there was a violation of the Constitution of the state of Michigan. So to really understand the significance of this, it's very important. But first, we should discuss a key principle of our system of government. This applies at the national level, the United States Constitution, and the state level. So all our states are structured the same way as the federal government is, where there's three branches of government: an executive branch, which is the president or a governor; a legislative branch, which they all have a Senate and a House of Representatives; and a judicial branch. And they're separated, and they're supposed to remain separate. They each have specific powers. So the legislative branch is in charge of making laws. And the U.S. Constitution and the state constitutions all say basically a initial principle is that all legislative power is vested in Congress in the national level or in the state legislature, in the state level. So that means that only the legislative branch can pass laws, or we would know as rules or regulations. So all these things that we're dealing with under COVID-19, whether it's mask requirements or any rules that change behavior or shut down businesses or require kids to go to school with masks on, all those things are rules and or laws, you would call them. The governor's job is to basically enforce the laws, not to make the laws. So there are exigent circumstances and emergencies where the governor can take short-term action, and those are usually within 30 days, 28 days in Michigan's case, and in Oregon's case, where when there's an initial crisis, there's power is pretty much temporarily given to the governor as the chief executive officer to make decisions to sort of stabilize things. And since that time, of course, these executive orders have continued in all the states, other than a few, like South Dakota that we know. The governor chose not to pass any major executive orders to limit the restrictions or freedoms of their people. But in Michigan and Oregon and California and New York and Illinois and most of the states, they have. So the question is, does the governor have that power? And the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that the governor does not have that power. The governor has to work with the legislative branch to deal with these issues, to get basically the feedback of the entire people through their elected representatives about what is the proper response of government to the pandemic or crisis, whatever many of us don't think it's really a pandemic, but it's for the people to decide through their elected officials, not the governor or not one person. So a basic principle is in our system of government, we're considered Republican form of government, which we are a republic, which means that it's not a majority rule. Their individual rights are protected. The rights to property, the right to free speech, the right to assemble peacefully, the right to worship, all those are protected rights that are independent of a majority rule. So in essence, the Bill of Rights, the National Bill of Rights, the federal government's Bill of Rights, and the state Bill of Rights are restrictions on the democratic process. They restrict majority rule. So the majority of the citizens of a state cannot determine on their own that a certain religion is outlawed. It's not possible. 89, 90, 98% can want it, and it's still not the law because there's freedom of religion protected. So this is not a democratic system. This is a republic, and that means individual rights are protected. So that's one basic principle. So what that means actually in relation to our system here, we're dealing with the coronavirus, is that we have individual rights that have to be protected. And to do that, we also need the entire legislative body to be involved in decisions. It's not just going to be the executive that's deciding if we have a pandemic, if we should restrict certain businesses from operating, if we have to require certain medical procedures or safety precautions. That's not an executive decision. That's a legislative decision. So the Supreme Court of Michigan basically ruled through the non-delegation principle. It's a principle that you cannot, when the people delegate the legislative power to the legislative branch, the legislative branch is not authorized to delegate its power, making laws, to anybody else, including the executive branch, the governor. So basically, those Michigan executive orders were violations of the non-delegation principle. This is a basic principle of our system of government. In Oregon, the same thing happened, and our Supreme Court ruled in favor of the governor, despite it being abundantly clear to anybody who has the knowledge of our legal system that the governor is not the authorized branch of government to pass laws. So, and there's some states that it comes down to almost like, does the Supreme Court have any judicial independence or judicial integrity? And in Michigan's, it does, which is fantastic. Now, the implication of this is fantastic because this sets a precedent for people who feel they've been unjustly restricted in their freedoms by the executive branch's executive orders in relation to coronavirus to challenge those executive orders. And in Oregon, we lost. Okay, the people lost in this respect, but there is another possibility, which is the United States Constitution requires that every state have a Republican form of government. So that's basically the federal government is authorized to make sure that we have a Republican form of government. A Republican form of government is a government that is defined by a separation of powers. Legislative power to the legislative branch, not the executive branch. So there is an argument to make at the federal level that there could be a challenge to the actual system of government we have in Oregon and California. It is not a Republican form of government. We do not have separation of powers. We do not have individual rights that are being protected. We have basically a autocratic government where the governor is not a monarch exactly. It's not a hereditary situation, but an autocratic government where there's the power of one to rule over the people. So that is the definition of tyranny when we have all power vested in one branch of government. So let's see if that's an argument that we can put forward in the other states that have not had the Supreme Courts stand by their principles, these founding principles. And we shall see as the days and weeks and months go ahead. But I want to give the good news to those of us who are aware of our legal system and how it operates, and it protects individual liberty. It protects, it also gives the government the power to take appropriate action to protect the people from infections or crises or everything, but it has to be done in the correct way with the input of the legislative branch. And that's what the Supreme Court of Michigan said. The governor is fully authorized to work with the legislative branch to work out the best possible way to deal with this situation. And that's the way it should be done. We live in a system where each branch has its power, and the legislative branch should be making the rules and the laws as reflected in the will of the people. We can influence the legislative branch through our elected officials. So good news and possibility for some hope. So this is Jim Jordan with the Citizens Legal Education, wishing you a great day.